Little David would see his mother for the last time. Her funeral, as bad as it was already planned. She was far too young. But when David went to visit her with his aunt, something remarkable happened. David said something strange. He repeated this several times. In reaction to this, it was decided to cancel the funeral. But what did David say to his mother? And why was Rose so stressed about this? Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Haley was a loving mother to David. They did everything together. She loved him so much it hurt. Every morning, Haley and David would go on a stroll. David loved to go to a nearby park and swing for hours. David's father was not in the picture. He had left Haley just before she gave birth to David. Haley would drop David off at her parents' house every Wednesday so that she could have a day to herself. She never fully enjoyed it because she missed David, but she knew it was good for her. She would go to the gym or spend time with her best friend, her sister Rose. Rose and Haley had 4 years between them. She was very protective of her sister, being the older one. Haley could see that David loved his auntie and that they had a great bond together. So she made Rose David's godmother in her will. Rose didn't know about this, but she would soon find out. Haley's death was a tragedy. She died way too soon, and the whole community mourned for her. David didn't know what was happening. His Aunt Rose had come to pick him up and had brought him to his grandparents. He didn't understand why everyone was so sad around him and kept asking about his mother. Rose acted strong and happy around her nephew, but she was hurting inside. She had just lost her best friend, her sister. She knew David didn't understand, so she sought distraction in him. They would help each other in a way. Rose expected David to go and live with his grandparents, but it soon turned out that wasn't going to happen. Rose found out that she was David's godmother. Why did her sister keep this secret from her? She loved her nephew, but she never imagined herself being a mom at this age. David was to stay with his grandparents until after the funeral, so Rose would have time to move out of her apartment and into Haley's home. It was tough for Rose to adjust to this. Everything was moving so fast. She had lost her sister, became a mother, and moved homes all in a matter of a few hours. On the morning after the accident, Rose got a call. It was from an unknown number, but she answered it anyway. A man started talking from the other side. She didn't realize who it was at first, but then it clicked. It was Vincent, David's father. He had heard about the accident and wanted to claim David. This was not going to happen. Rose told Vincent that she was his godmother, and Haley wanted her to care for David. But Vincent disagreed with that. They heatedly argued, and Vincent told her to watch her back because he was coming for her. This didn't scare Rose. Vincent had never been a real father to David. This was a done deal. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. When Rose opened the door, her mouth fell open. Vincent was standing opposite of her and barged through the door. "Where is my son?" he said. But David was still at his grandparents' house. Rose wondered why Vincent was so keen on seeing his son. He had never cared for David, so why did he care now? They kicked Vincent out of their house and told him not to return. But Vincent was persistent. He wouldn't give up that easily. Rose had to be careful. She called the undertaker and gave an explanation of how Vincent looked. The last thing she needed was for Vincent to crash the funeral. The funeral is in 3 days. After that, David will be her responsibility. This scared Rose. She hoped that her maternal instinct would show up and she would just know what to do. But she couldn't be sure, so she decided to look through her late sister's things. Maybe she could find her sister's diary. She knew it wasn't ethical of her to read her sister's diary, but she saw it as research. She hoped Haley would describe how she disciplined David or anything that would help her raise the boy. Rose found a little book and opened it. This is it. She starts reading and tears up. She misses her sister. Haley wrote about the fun times she and her sister had and how perfect her little boy is. She also wrote about Vincent, how he never returned her calls and never even mailed a happy birthday card to his son. If he didn't want anything to do with his son then, why now? Rose finds this shift in behavior strange. She wonders if Vincent has an ulterior motive. Maybe he wanted to get money from the government or help around the house. But that would never happen. Not as long as Rose was in charge of David. She went to the police station the next day. She figured that would be the wise thing to do. But the officers told her that she needed proof. All she had now were accusations. But that wouldn't last long because Vincent was waiting for her at her doorstep when she returned. She invited him in. She told him that she had been to the police office today to inform them about his latest actions. Vincent turned pale as he heard the words police office. Rose frowned and asked him about it, but he got up and left in a hurry, not saying a word as he walked out of the door. Rose hoped that would be the last she saw from him. It was a police officer. They had looked into Vincent and found some worrying information about him. It turned out that he drove the same car as the one that had hit her sister in that freak accident. They came up with a plan. It was possible that Vincent felt guilty and would show up at the funeral to pay his respects. If that were the case, the police would be informed immediately. Rose told the undertaker and her parents the plan so everyone knew what was happening. The funeral was tomorrow, and Rose dreaded this day. She couldn't believe that this was all happening at the same time. But tomorrow would be the day everything comes to an end. It was the morning of the funeral, and Rose was sick to her stomach. She wanted this day to be over quickly, but she also wanted to be present at the funeral and say goodbye to her sister. She met her grandparents at the crematorium and took David in her arms. They would start the ceremony by saying some words about her sister. After the ceremony, there was time to say goodbye. Everyone formed a line, and they could walk toward the coffin to say something. It was an open casket, and Haley looked peaceful in it. Rose suddenly sees two police officers walking through the room. She wonders if the undertaker had called them because he had seen Vincent in the building. But Rose decided to let it go and focus on herself and David. This was an important time for him to get some closure. Rose and David were the last of the guests to make their way past the coffin with David's late mother in it. He looked down at her with worry in his eyes. "Mom asleep?" he asked Rose. "Yes." She replies, not knowing what to say. She notices that David got a strange look on his face. He mumbled something Rose couldn't understand and got frustrated when she didn't do anything. He tried to worm himself out of her arms, but Rose stepped away from the coffin and put him on the ground. David started to cry. He tried to lift himself on the edge of the coffin to look over it at his mother, so Rose picked him up again. She looked around to see if someone could help her, but no one was in the room anymore. She calmed David down and asked him what it was he was saying. This time, Rose understood him and notified the undertaker about David's findings. She knew she couldn't go through with the funeral if this weren't sorted out. Rose assured David that they would look into this, and all they could do was wait now. David calmed down, and they waited outside. The undertaker walked outside and informed her that the issue had been resolved. She walked inside with David in her arms and looked at her sister. She looked complete now. Rose couldn't believe David would notice such a small detail about his mother. This showed how much he loved her. David noticed that Haley wasn't wearing her necklace with her and David's initials. She had gotten that necklace from Rose for David's birth and had worn it every day since then. But the paramedics had to take it off after her accident. Luckily for Rose, someone could pick it up at the hospital. The funeral could continue, and it was a beautiful ceremony. She got cremated but still had a little memorial stone on the wall, so David had a place to visit. Rose went to her parents' house afterward to pick up some of David's things and suddenly thought about Vincent. She hadn't seen him all day. Her parents told her that Vincent did show up, but the undertaker noticed this and notified the police immediately. This way, it didn't disturb the mourners, and the ceremony could continue without trouble. Rose was happy to hear this. They could finally let this all behind them and get some closure.